Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for an episode of Into the Flu. In today's episode, I had the immense pleasure of interviewing and having a great conversation with Keith Garletts, one of the original illustrators from the Harry Potter trading card game. In this interview, you'll hear him talk about his time with Wizards of the Coast and art school and all these different details and just really good insight to the card game itself. I did want to provide a caveat before we get into it. The beginning and the very end of the video, we did experience some technical difficulties. So as a result of that, it just didn't make sense for me to keep it in the video. So I just completely cut those two out. So what you'll see towards the end of the video is us discussing the commission that Keith did for me. So I commissioned him to do a painting from the Prisoner of Azkaban as though it were to be a card. So we chose a scene that he kind of, thought in his mind as a specific card, and he painted that for me. And so I'll post some pictures of it, and it's an absolute masterpiece. I'm very, very happy with it. So that kind of sparked this sort of idea that while we were in the process of him showing me sketches from this, and then actually the final product of creating a playmat for the Harry Potter trading card game. I know that Wizards of the Coast did produce like starter set playmats that kind of show where the cards go and things like that. But like many of these other big card games, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, etc., there's like a plethora of playmats, right? And so what I wanted to do was work with Keith to do a playmat, and he's all for it. So I'm really excited about that. I hope you are all too. So moving forward into the future, whenever we decide on the actual illustration, etc., then on my Instagram I can post some sketches and maybe like some things that it'll look like, or maybe I'll keep it a surprise. So you'll hear us talk a little bit about it, but not in depth, just because of the results of the technical difficulties. So that is something to look forward to. Again, I'm very excited about it. I hope you are all too. And we're still kind of in the works in terms of designing what it would look like. So if you have anything in mind, then just leave it in the comments below. Without any further shenanigans on my end, please enjoy this interview with Keith Garletts.
So, just at the time, it was a very unique thing because it's all guys in this. We had maybe five girls in the entire school.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just really weird, really weird circumstance to be in. However,
Yeah.
In a worn out brown paper sack, like a lunch sack, was cassettes were being passed around almost as if they were drugs. And Tommy Zimmerman, you should probably know that name.
Yeah.
He came up to me, he handed me the bag, and he was like, "Dude, check this out, man. I think it's right up your alley." So my first exposure was actually listening to them on audio cassette. So I'm hearing Jim Dale.
Oh yeah.
Read these things, and so I just plowed through that first book. I mean, at art school, you're spending a lot of nights, overnighters and things to get assignments done. If I could say one thing about that school, they really, really pushed always hitting the deadline. And so that was the primary focus of that school. So yeah, all of us guys were in a constant state of being tired, staying up all night to hit really tight school deadlines. And so I burnt through it, and then I handed it off to my friend Jonas. He listened to it, and then the next book came in, and it all just started circulating around. And now you have an entire year of guys. Schools broke it down first, second, third year, rather than freshman, sophomore, stuff like that. But the whole year, guys now are eagerly waiting for Goblet of Fire to come out.
Wow.
Which, it's essentially a children's book, but we're all, grown men at this time, all primarily in like the 19 to early 20-year-old range. And yeah, love that book. Love the whole entire series. And so yeah, in my third year of school, that's when, it was like, hey, you're going to go work for Spiderweb Art Gallery. Well, I had to go interview and all that. I got a job doing computer work.
Mm-hmm.
Met with Rocco, who is the co-owner of Spiderweb and the agent of a stable of artists, with all of which will be mentioned in this story. Right. But so as I'm going there and just helping her set up her website and scan stuff and, you name it, she's like, "Hey, I got your work." Like, what? And so I'm pretty sure, yeah, the dark potion bottle, right, was the very first pro job that I got in school. And then I started doing Harry Potter and Magic the Gathering roughly the same time. But that bottle was the first ever live job. And another cool thing about the Kubert School is when you got an art job, you get to incorporate that into your schoolwork.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a professional school. It's all about developing professionals. So I went to my instructors and I was like, "Look, I got this job. I'm doing this. Can I incorporate it into my assignments?" And they're like, "Yep, absolutely. But here, you got to go through the stages in class. You have to bring it in. I have to review it, and all that." So, there were no teachers making any kind of corrections on this stuff. Like you take it and show them like, "Oh, okay, great, that's awesome." But primarily it was me going back and forth with like Gene, and then Paul Hanchett was the art director on it. Sorry, I'm trying to recall all this stuff and reminiscing. Now I'm getting a little bit long-winded. But yeah, so to answer your question in a very long way, I was a fan before I started doing the job.
Because actually, I grew up listening to the books first, really. So I'm kind of in the same boat as you. And I think Jim Dale did a phenomenal job. And so when those were being handed around, was it something that like everyone in that kind of cohort was like a fan of Harry Potter at the time? Were any of them like, "I'm going to read the book first," or it was just a matter of like getting on the tapes? And did that help your envisioning those pieces of art that you ended up sketching and painting?
It did. The one thing that helped, okay, no one in the school is like, "Okay, I want to hold off and read the books first." No one really had time to read a book except for Kevin Dobler.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Kevin Dobler, I lived with him for a year, right after we got out of school. But that guy would eat a meal with a book in his hand. He went everywhere. So that guy may have been the one to actually read them first. But other than that, no one else did. So it was just listening to them on the books. But it was okay. So, you can't help but formulate your own thoughts and ideas of what these guys look like and what the world looks like. And then when you get into the job, though, you are given a style guide. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. That has, hey, here's the character turnarounds and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of have to marry the images you had in your head with what is in the style guide. Now, the Harry Potter style guide, I have no qualms in saying, was loose at best. The characters appeared different ways on different pages, and no one was set on which one was the right one.
Right.
So that style guide was extremely loose, and while 99.9% of my experience with the job, with everything, it was wonderful. That style guide being so loose did create some problems for everyone. But one thing I would say that, you have to marry all that stuff, but the knowledge of what was going on behind the scenes and what informed the actual card became really, really beneficial, because by that time, I probably listened to everything that was out multiple times over,
Mm-hmm.
So, and so when I would talk to, Greg and Tim Hildebrandt, Mark Romanowski, Alex Horley,
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, Tommy Zimmerman, Bob Patillo, these are all the guys that I knew at the time that were doing this job. I was able to give them additional information that would, enhance what they were doing.
Oh, wow. Okay. And it sounds like, so a lot of those names are, obviously really popular in the Harry Potter TCG, and I know some of the other TCGs like Magic the Gathering. So for the most part, were you all kind of like hired like around the same time? Like how did the hiring process go with Magic the Gathering? How did that come about?
Okay, that all goes through Gene Scirocco,
Okay.
who is the agent. Every bit of it.
Wow.
And so Greg and Tim were her primary clients. And so she said, look, this job was coming in. It was still new. The movies weren't out, so they still didn't know how well this stuff would translate. She just told them, she's like, look, I got a whole group of guys. Here's their work. She showed samples, and she's like, I want cards for them. So all these descriptions are just now pouring in for all this stuff. And so I was doing the computer work as well. Kevin and I were. So as these would come in, we would read all the descriptions. We would divvy up who's was supposed to go to who. We'd help get them the reference and all that, and then pass it out and give them the information they needed. So it was like I had a dual function at that time.
Right. Okay. And so it was like Wizards of the Coast themselves approached Jean because of this agency that she had, and they were like, hey, we're looking for some artists. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, I think Greg and Tim were already working on Magic at the time. So Magic the Gathering was still relatively new as well.
Right.
It came out in like the mid to late 90s. And so this is the early 2000, 2001. So they were already doing Magic. So she had started building relationships with the art directors there. And I can't remember if she had worked with Paul on the Magic line as well. And then he switched over to Potter. Because the only art director I knew from back at that time was Dana Knudsen. And then Jeremy Cranford took over after him.
Right.
So I don't know exactly how the relationships with the art directors went, other than maybe, say, hey, we got this other thing that's coming up. Are Greg and Tim interested? And then her saying, yeah, plus I have these guys.
Gotcha. Okay.
We all drug along. So, I'm grateful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what an amazing opportunity. And like you said, it was like like while you were in school and then out of school. I mean, that's like you said, like a dream come true. It's like, this is something that I'm going to be able to work on, not only a piece of art that's gonna, right, like that you're gonna get paid for, but also like a really big name. And I think at the time, I mean, like you said, I mean, people were lining up just to get the books, and everybody was, I mean, handing out the tapes like drugs. You know what I mean? It was like you said, like, there's this really big event, and so that might have been, was that like a life-changing sort of moment for you? Did you like think like, dang, like this is something big for me?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it set me. It was the first professional job. I came to New Jersey to seek out employment in the commercial arts, and I went to school for it. And boom, before I'm even out of the gate, I got a job coming in, and Kevin has jobs coming in, and Tommy has jobs coming in, and so it was really, really encouraging at the time in that way of like, okay, and it lasted. I mean, we had solid work with it for 2 years. So that was fantastic. I mean, the biggest life-changing thing though for me is, I started dating the woman who's now my wife in my last year at school. So I meet a girl, I get a job, I land this job, everything's looking wonderful. And, paychecks coming in specifically from Harry Potter cards, paid for my engagement ring.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
So there's always that tie for me.
Wow.
Like, yep, there's the paycheck, take it and buy it. And so, yeah, it changed my life drastically in that way.
Yeah, of course. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
It was fun. I wish, that's something, I mean, I look back on that time with great fondness, and I do wish that the game could have continued on. That would have been fun.
Yeah, and speaking to that, there are so many things that have kind of circulated in terms of like why did the game meet its demise? What are some of the things that happened? And as I understand it, and if you have other information or something, you can definitely jump in here, but it seems like it was Warner Brothers had purchased the rights to Harry Potter at the time, and Wizards of the Coast just wasn't given permission any longer to produce the game because they wanted to make cards that were more reflective of the movies or something like that. That's like the main kind of thing that we hear. Is that?
Yeah, I would say that that's pretty accurate. Because I don't know how the licensing worked on that end of everything. I just know we were already working on it when the first movie came out, and Greg and Gene, they went to see it in the theater and they were like, this is going to be huge. We need to maybe up the game here or something. This movie's going to be huge. And it kept going for a while. And at that time, other things were still being licensed out, like calendars and things like that were based on the style guide. Actually, you know what? I'll say that Warner Brothers had the license immediately. Yeah, as I'm thinking back, because they're the one who gave us the style guide.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
But the style guide didn't have any of the concept art for the movies in it. It just had different, like Mary Grand Prix's art was in it, and then a mix mash of stuff, probably from foreign publications, and maybe some guys developing. I don't know who they are, but they had even done some scenes, and I think some of those early guys were trying to replicate a little bit of what Mary Grand Prix was doing in the books. But yeah, so that style guide came from Warner's, so they had it. But yeah, as we were going through and we were doing Chamber of Secrets, and there are a ton of paintings that were produced for Chamber of Secrets that never made publication. So at the time, yeah, we're doing it. And then it was just like, okay, guys, we're not doing the game anymore. We're closing shop. Everything is now they want it to reflect the actors. So
yeah, that was something that, because there had been this, as you said, like this, there's a lot of art that had been produced that was supposed to be for the game, or even I heard for like a continuation, like another expansion, right? Because there's 5 expansions that exist, and then the 6th one would have been something like Prisoner of Azkaban, for example. But as I understand it, it's up to Chamber of Secrets that all of the artists had been.
yes.
Okay, so there maybe wasn't necessarily anything in the works for Prisoner of Azkaban.
To my knowledge, there was no art produced for Azkaban. At least from our end, and all of the artists that I mentioned, no assignments, nothing. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of recalling back now, okay, I got to give a little bit more information. Sorry.
Yeah.
When I mentioned that the style guide became an issue, we would have to submit our sketches to the art director, who would then give them to a committee at Warner Brothers. Now, I had heard at the time, I don't know if this is true or if this is complete hearsay, right? But they had to, okay, so the sketches went to J.K. Rowling first. She okayed everything across the board. Then it went to Warner Brothers, and with a very large committee.
Okay.
And whereas in all of my other dealings with, like with Wizards, particularly at that time, art director saw it, okayed it or not. They might check with the copywriters and the game developers to see if the art fits. and then that's it. It's a very smooth process. But this ended up taking a very, very long time. Like we'd submit them and then wouldn't hear anything. At one point, I think it became like 2 months. We didn't hear anything. And then we got back. It'd be like, okay, character's not on model. And that was the only critique.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, what? And that became, okay, well, are they supposed to look like this? Are they supposed to look like this? Which page? Because they look different. And that just wasn't a seamless process at all. And we ended up, waiting. And then it was like, okay, guys, all these paintings are due tomorrow.
Oh.
And so I ended up painting 2 paintings overnight to finish off the job. One was Obliviate. I remember that. And I can't remember the other one that I did that time. So those were a little bit rushed.
Wow.
And then it was just, like waiting game. And then all of a sudden, game's over, guys.
Oh, geez. It was, yeah. So, I mean, and that's the thing. It was like really short lived. I mean, for everyone involved. And it was kind of like this, it sort of stays this sort of like mysterious thing that's like, wait, but we were just working on it. And it was phenomenal and we loved it. And at one point I read that it was like the second highest grossing game or toy of that year. And so I think, at the time I was a young kid, but even looking back at it now, I'm like, I mean, I knew because I had purchased some of the cards and stuff in stores. And so I think it was a bit of a shocker.
Yeah, I've heard that. If not the second best, I think I heard that it was the best.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah.
But again, I don't know. I've never seen the actual stats.
Yeah.
It could all be made up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and just like kind of what you were discussing about the sketches and some of the things that you'd have to change. I do have some of the sketches here. So like I'll pull this one. One of my faves of yours, and you were so nice to send me some of these. So like this one here is the practical joke, which is hard.
Yes.
And so there's actually two of these sketches that are supposed to be, I guess, both practical joke. This being the other one, which is more
That's the final.
This. Yep. So then you would send something like this first one, and then they'd say, no, I want you to change it, or how do you get from this to this?
Okay, so I sent the first one in, which is the one with the mouse trap on the hands and all that, and they just said they wanted it a little less busy. So there's like thorns on the chairs and mouse trap on there.
Okay, all right.
So I went from that and then just turned the figure around, and so you can see that he's more in a classroom and things like that, and kept a lot of the same stuff, but just flopped it.
Yeah.
Yep. So once it gets approved, I probably should have, but I didn't at the time make any real changes. I mean, I may have made a few edits here and there, but I think particularly at that time, I went straight from final sketch, transferring that to the canvas of the board, and then going right from it.
And then going, okay, gotcha. And there was a couple others like these ones that I recently got from you. So these two, as I understand it, they weren't printed. Then these were just sort of sketches.
They were not printed. Yep. So that is Minor Nuisance, and I think Crab was the first version, and that's the version I actually really liked. And they were like, "Hey, can you make it Goyle?" And or wait, hang on, which one's the dark-haired guy? That's Goyle. That's Goyle. So it was Goyle first, right? I preferred Goyle, and they wanted it to be Crab, and I had to change it to Crab. That's how it went.
Gotcha. Okay, and then this one, I'm assuming may have been part of Chamber of Secrets then, and that was one of the ones that just never went into print.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, That's awesome. One of the most sought after cards in the game at one point, and I think still is. I mean, like I mentioned to you on the phone, there's a really small community of people who actually play. I think the majority of people who are into the Harry Potter TCG are collectors, which is, obviously, which is fine. But there was one card in particular that at one point was like going for like $500, for a foil, and like $300 for a non-foil, maybe even prices higher than that. And that is Dobby's Disappearance, which is your card. Were you aware that your card
No,
the
no
card?
idea.
Everybody was like, "Give me that card!" I mean, you're talking like just unreal. Like people would like fight over it. I mean, wild.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
Well,
I had absolutely no idea whatsoever. I thought you were going to tell me it was like, shoot, like through the trap door or something like that, or whatever the one with the vines is, that it came from the style guide. I thought you were going to Devil's Snare. Yeah, because I heard that there were some people questioning the existence of Devil's Snare. But no, totally, you just blew my mind.
Yep.
Totally
I mean,
blew my mind.
yes, and it's funny that you say that you and Kevin Dobler had this relationship, because the card next to this one that was equally as sought after was his Dobby's Help. So these two sort of like go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something, because of course the art is similar, but it's also like, both from Chamber of Secrets. They're both Dobby, and they're both really good cards for the game. That's why I mentioned, like being players versus collectors, because for myself, being both, and like I mentioned to you jokingly, it's like I sometimes find myself playing on my own. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. No one's here to play. I guess I'll just play with Moaning Myrtle or something. But yeah, like in terms of in terms of those cards, I mean, it was really sought after because of just their ability. When you were working for Wizards of the Coast, did you ever have an opportunity to like sit down and play the game, or like were you explain anything? Did you know how to? No.
No idea. I know that they encourage people, even with Magic, learn the rules of the game. And maybe some people have done that, and it's probably a really good idea. But no one that I know has ever done that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't imagine so, because you said you were so busy, and even like with these tight deadlines, it's like your focus was creating the art for the game, not necessarily. I mean, it wasn't your job to do the rules or any of that kind of stuff, and so it was just making sure that you created the art, which is the thing that really draws people to it. I mean, that was like I mentioned, there's more collectors than there are players, and it's for that very reason. I mean, the cards themselves are so beautiful, and
hang on, sorry to interrupt there, but they were probably still developing the rules of the game while we were doing it, at least for that first, starter set and everything.
Yeah, that's
so. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry I interrupted you.
Oh no. I mean, but that's a good point. I mean, it was probably something that was like, is this really even like a finished product right now? And to that point, at one point there were these cards, these like beta sets, which was 80 cards that showed the artwork for the game prior to them looking the way that they do now. Were you familiar with those?
No.
Yeah, there was it was really kind of interesting the way that they look, because even the backs of the cards, like that's what, obviously that's what this looks like, but the back of the card was really different. I'm going to show you, actually. I'm going to grab one.
Yeah, please.
So this is this is what the card looks like that we all know, and the back of the card, and this was the back of the card for the like prototype or like the beta set.
Okay.
So really different. And then and these cards that I have are just lesson types, but this was the lesson type for for Magical Creatures, as opposed to the one which because so even the style of art itself is very different. So it's kind of like a unique thing. And anyway, in terms of like a card like this, for example, did they ask you to come up with like we're going to do a card that's called Dobby's Disappearance. Or did they tell you what the card was titled and then you were to draw something based off of that? Or how did that come about?
Okay, so with a lot of cards, they come in with the title of the card. Now, oftentimes they're working titles, so they'll change from the time I'm working on it on sketch and then it gets produced. And then there'll be a basic description. It's like, Harry in the hospital wing, Dobby has just disappeared, something like that. And you're like, okay, and then you kind of envision what that would look like. And I do believe in the books, it talks about them with the striped pajamas, hospital wing. And there's a vague recollection that this could be a little bit off. But at the time they were talking about having the pajamas look different. It was like no. In the book, it's this. And they're like, oh, okay. And then that's what it went with.
Gotcha. Okay.
It was something like that. I'm pretty sure it was that card, but
yeah, because even looking at both yours and Kevin's, the pajamas are really similar. It's just like short stripes. So,
and he and I lived together at that time. Like, so his bedroom and studio is right there. So I mean, we're working on these things next to each other, talking, and he would have been someone else that would have known that detail in the pajamas.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's incredible. Another card that was like pretty sought after, mostly for playability, was this, and this is Alex Horley, who you mentioned earlier, is this Venomous Tentacular Juice.
Okay.
And so one of the things that made this card, and this is just sort of like, a fun fact about how the playability of the game, these two went really good together because Dobby's help says your opponent draws 10 cards. Like that's the effect, right? And then Venomous Tentacular Juice says count the number of cards in your opponent's hand. He or she draws twice that many. And so the whole premise of the game is to get your opponent to discard basically their entire deck, right? Until they're down to 0. And so by doing this, you can basically have your opponent draw 10 cards, and then they would have to draw twice as many as in their hand. And so having both of those, I mean, you can get someone to draw like 30 cards. It's something so silly, it's like, so it's not even like your creatures, not even spells, nothing. It's just your drawing, and that's what makes you,
I think Alex was probably my favorite artist in that game. His style, I mean, it just goes perfectly. Now, I'd mentioned to you the other day, my 2 favorite images were done by Greg Hildebrandt. Right. But just across the board overall, Alex, I feel, really knocked every single painting out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, I mean, even just looking at this, like the colors and the way that, like, sorry for the glare, but yeah, like the colors there, I mean, it's Venomous Tentacular Juice at its finest. Yep. And the other thing is like, yep, that's probably how you would react. That's what you would look like. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think Disappearing Stare, is another one that's great. It's amazing. It's been like 20 years, 22 years, but I can recall a lot of it very, very clearly.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was such a big part of your life, like you said, so.
Yep.
And there's also this sketch that I have of yours. So this was this Knox you mentioned?
No. I'm sorry. That card is actually called Broken Wand.
Oh, this was the oh, okay.
That one was it was silly to me. Sorry to put it that way.
Oh.
Because I'm like, okay, well, if we're doing a Broken Wand, it should be Ron Weasley.
Right.
But they didn't want it to be Ron Weasley. So it's random student with Broken Wand. So like, while I'm sure other students break their wands, you're immediately going to associate it with Ron Weasley.
That's very true. And you know, the final card, Broken Wand, is what I would think would be Ron Weasley. Actually, it's an item card, and it's, you know, like a red head that has a broken wand. And then there's charms, the charms
Charmed
act,
Class Accidents. Yep.
which is this card here.
Yep.
Again, very very similar.
And you'll see another difference in there, that the hats have brims.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
And I, if I'm, I can't remember now. Now I need to go back. If they mention that the hats have brims in the book,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the way they were drawn. And then they were like, we're going without brims, take all the brims off.
Gotcha.
And then in the movie, they came out and they just have the little cap. And then they ditch the caps. And you never see a cap again unless it's on one of the professors. Throughout the whole series. Whoops, I'm running low on battery. It's not real. Sorry.
Oh,
So I've got a little battery left. If we cut off, I'll go plug in and call you back, or we can pick this up at another time or whatever.
yeah, no worries.
So yeah, Charms Class Accident. Take off the brim.
Yeah, I didn't actually even notice that until you pointed it out, and I would have to also go back because I don't remember. I just remember them, you know, like the wizard hats, you know, but I didn't really even pick up on that one detail. So that's really cool.
I mean, yeah, wizard hats have the brims because, you know, the sorting hat has a brim for sure.
Yeah.
And so even if they don't mention it directly, it's certain hats have brims.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of bothered me in the movies. It's like, why they ditch the hats?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have hats on.
Yeah,
So,
right. What's all the fuss about this hat? You're not even using it. Yeah. Oh, well, there's another sketch here, which is a 3-month long match.
Yep.
And that's this card here.
Yes. I
It's,
remember that one.
yeah, it seems like that's pretty
Probably like straight transfer.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, straight transfer.
Now, you know, one thing I have to say about all this early art and getting these jobs while I was still in school, I was in way over my head. You know, I was in way over my head. And so, yeah, you're trying to do the best you can to make a good looking painting, and the shifting deadlines and all that stuff was a little stressful, but I did the best I could for the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, you know, your cards are some of the, like I said, you know, like the most sought after, from the art to just the way that, you know, like the me and the community sort of feel like there's this depiction of the Harry Potter TCG, the Harry Potter story is within this. And so I feel like, I mean, if you would have told me that like a 20-something-year-old made this art, I'd be like, there's no way, you know. I mean, so just, you know, not to gas you up so much, but I think that you did a phenomenal job, you know. I mean,
I appreciate it, really do.
I really do. So during that time you mentioned that there was like the style guide. Is this the style guide you were talking about? No. Okay.
Nope. Ours was it was basically like if you took a bunch of papers and you went to Staples and said, hey, I have a project, you know, a report that I need to have printed, and they put it in black spiral with a clear binder.
Yeah.
That's what the style guide was.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think I remember we were messaging back and forth about that because I was asking about it and you were like, no, they were all thrown out. And
all thrown out.
I was depressed for a day and a half after hearing that.
Yeah. I actually, as I thought about it, I remember making the decision, and I kept that thing for years. And I pulled it out and I'm like, I'm never going to use this again.
Yeah.
It went. And I think everybody else probably did the same thing.
Uh, yeah, I'll go be sick later after hearing that. So at the time, so like I know a lot of the art that's actually like in this style guide, which I know is a Warner Brothers. I know this isn't what you used for the card game, but a lot of the art in it seems to be sort of like reflective of that time. Like
Yep.
even like Snape, some of the characters. So
Yeah,
what?
the turnarounds, that Harry Potter turnaround. Yeah, for sure.
So
Now, I think when you showed me that before, um, sorry, I just totally stepped on top of you there. I'm sorry about that. Um, they went back and refined everything a little bit,
okay,
from what we had.
yeah.
So that was like with the main characters, they got certain things locked in a little better.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that makes sense, right? Because a lot of the art that's in this, it seems like most of it comes from, or you'll see most of it, I should say, on a lot of the materials, like the promotional materials, the toys, the calendars, things like that that came out around that time that were different from the card game. So it wasn't necessarily the TCG art. It was like like I mentioned, like the calendars or even like some of the toys, things like that that came out for
Yep.
franchise.
Yeah, and I think there was probably a lot of it that's in there that was what was given to us to inform us on what to do, and I'm sure they added more, maybe took some away, and
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
to make it just a little bit more marketable.
yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Um, Another question I have is, were you aware that there was a toy that was specific for the Harry Potter trading card game? It was made specific for the Harry Potter TCG. So,
No.
and this was another thing that was like kind of like randomly showed up like some years ago, and so I have mine like I hang it on the wall because it's like my prized possession. But this is what it looked like.
So what is that? What's in there? Is that a
So
calculator?
it looks like a calculator, and actually, I own one that's like out of its package. This is what it looks like opened.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically like a book, right? It's kind of like a Pokédex. I don't know if you were familiar with those from back in the day, but basically, it was only for the base set, the very first set, right? And it had like a list of all of the cards in here that you'd be able to see. You could reference them. And then you would choose like the deck that you want to make. It would like build a deck for you, and then it would like shuffle it so that you can see what your first hand would look like. I mean, just absolute like
That's great.
mind-blowing technology for
Yeah.
the card game. It's like,
Oh, that's fantastic.
yeah, so it was wild. And I was always curious, like if at that time, you or anybody else was like aware that these things kind of like existed outside of just the art.
No, had no idea.
Yeah, it's something that's like really funky, and even just like there was another one that was similar to it called the Book of Spells, and it looked just like a book like this, but it was purple, and it was for like the movie. It would just like they show you some art, you can see the characters like in that small little dot matrix screen, but this one was like specific for the game, which all of the promotional material that came from that time really showed me that Wizards of the Coast was like really doing their best to
Yeah.
like promote this game. And so I think that was wonderful.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Thanks for showing me that thing. That's like, I'm sure
Yeah.
that's probably what they're doing with like the online version of like Magic and stuff now.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's wild. And kind of going back to what you're saying about the movies and when the movie came out, there was like this sort of like poster thing that I had found a couple years ago online that showed a children's like popcorn set, so it has like, like you can get your popcorn and your drink and your snack. And then there was also a place where they would put two promo cards for the Harry Potter trading card game in this like kids popcorn set. And so it was like at the time that the movie was coming out, they were still trying to, like they
Push
were,
the game. Yeah.
yeah. So it was like it kind of seemed like they were working together, and then all of a sudden it was that we're good. So,
Yeah, it's like, when someone, it makes sense, from a business standpoint, you're putting zillions of dollars into making these movies and investing into these young actors and actresses. And you've got merch out there that doesn't reflect them. I totally get it. I'd make the same exact decision if I was that person of, nope, get it out of here. We got to make everything Daniel Radcliffe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, like you said, like, if we look at it logically, it's like, okay, we get it. Like, are we sad about it? Sure, but we're at least still able to appreciate it. I mean, I have the cards right in front of me. I'm able to talk to you about it. So it's something that it's still, something that's appreciated, right? But like you said, from a business perspective, it's like we have to.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, I did commission you to do some art. And I remember when we first started talking about it, I was like, I just want something that is like from that time, like what would be, maybe even from the books or from the book that wasn't able to be made into the cards, right? And so we were talking about Prisoner of Azkaban. And so then you ended up doing this, and I'll just show it here, which is pardon the glare, but essentially you've called it the Boggart's Confusion, which is this incredibly magical piece that shows that part of the book where Professor Lupin, right? Professor Lupin is teaching class about the Boggart, and as as it's coming out, it's like shape shifting depending on each student. So walk me through your mindset of that.
Okay, so when I initially started thinking about it, I was kind of misremembering the book a little bit, and or at least that may be just what built in my head all these years that I just didn't know that I was thinking about it incorrectly. Was that everything, it was shape shifting, that as it would see another student, it would morph into these other things. That's kind of how I always envisioned it. And then when I went back, I realized that it changed with a crack. And it was like one thing at a time. But I was like, okay, well, just doing Snape, with the hat on and all that, that's not as fun. The whole point of this thing is to scare everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, so if I was to try to capture that as a card, how would I do it? And I was like, okay, I would take some artistic license and go with a morphing effect. And then, in those initial sketches, I think even I started combining some of the movie elements where I thought that the spider then had roller skates. So I drew that, and then it was, the legs come off.
I remember that. Yeah.
Shit. Whoops, sorry for my language there. And I'm like, okay, well, if I try to do a spider with its legs off and it rolling on the ground, that's not going to make too much sense. So with that, I left it as is, as the spider. And, but so I captured the different time frames of what things were going on. So the mummy is unraveling, so that's already going, and there's the giant eyeball that has fallen out. And, you can't really tell that the banshee doesn't have a voice, but that's that section, it's hard to capture a sound unless she was grabbing her throat. And I was like, I don't want her to look like she's choking herself out, so I'm going to leave that as is. And then first and foremost, that Snape had to be there. There's the two most important elements in my mind with Snape and the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
And then the others kind of fall into place, but those are the definitive elements of that scene to me.
Mm-hmm.
Where Lupin first realizes that this nemesis of his from his childhood is picking on this student, and so you really get that moment of compassion from between Lupin and Neville.
Right.
That's fantastic. And then obviously that's where you get another clue of who Lupin is or what he is, what he turns into.
Yep.
So those were the pivotal elements of that scene for me. And then I was like, okay, well, how do I give them the equal importance almost. Well, it's like you make Snape centralized figure in there, and then make the moon the light source. So that just, it lights up everything, and really, a little bit of foreshadowing or whatever, that moonlight going across everything.
All right, everybody, that's kind of where we ended up. His phone died, and then he did end up calling me back, but that was sort of where we met some technical issues in terms of audio. So even if I included the remainder of our interview and conversation, you wouldn't be able to hear anything, so I didn't really want to tease anybody. I really hope that you enjoyed the content and the information that was shared by Keith, the little bits that he was able to provide us and some insight to that time. I was absolutely blown away with this conversation, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. So the little bit that I wanted to discuss, which was the main, kind of part that you didn't hear about the playmat, or the specific details of it. So in the coming days, Keith and I are going to discuss the design, and I'm going to, of course, give him his liberty to do that. He has some things in his mind already, which I'm very excited about, having worked for Magic the Gathering and having seen playmats. This is going to be something that, again, I'm very, very excited about, and I hope you are too. What I will say, though, is this isn't going to be something that I'm going to make hundreds of. I'm only going to make a small amount. So for those of you who follow me on Instagram, and for those of you who are kind enough to support me and watch the videos on YouTube, then I would assume that you are seeing this, and you can leave a comment below so that I know to put you on the list for someone who might want it. So yeah, I know that there's a small community out there already of collectors, and an even smaller community within that who are actual players who might want to use a playmat. And I know of some people already who have just been kind of in conversation with me, or some friends that I chat with and play with. So anyway, if you are interested in it, let me know. And I'll add you to it. Like I said, I'm not going to make a bunch of them. I'm just going to, contact a company, whatever their minimum amount is. That'll be it, and then you can just pay for that. I'm not going to make anything off of this. This isn't like a bunch of money going in my pocket. Like I said, it's just something that I want to be able to share with all of you. I could, of course, just have the art made for me, and then a playmat made for me, and then that's it. But I don't want to do that. I want us to be able to play together and to have these kind of things together. And so I hope that all of you will enjoy it as much as I do. So anyway, without going into all of that, I'll make another video when it comes a little bit closer to the playmat and kind of provide updates for it. I still don't know if I'm gonna provide like images of it just yet. It might just be something that we kind of have like as a surprise, but I think it's really great that it's an artist who worked on the game from all those years ago, creating the playmat, which is something that I think is really special and unique. So anyway, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you again for watching. Have fun, be safe, and I'll see you next time.